Welcome everyone. We'll give it a minute. Allow the group to join and get settled. Takes just a moment. This is fun. I see a few names that I recognize. Maybe give it just 30 seconds more before we jump in. All right, I think we're going to jump in. We might have a few more join us as we move along a little bit, but that's okay. Welcome everyone to this breakout session. I hope you've had a great day. I've been a little frustrated by the fact that I have been double and triple booked and haven't been able to participate much in the summit today. I plan to participate tomorrow, but I've always enjoyed participating in the Homeless Summit in years past, and so much great information, so many wonderful people involved in this great endeavor of helping so many in the community who are in serious need of support. And I was invited some time ago to be a participant and to present on a topic that is important to me, but full disclosure, I don't pretend to be an expert on the topic that I'm about to share some thoughts about. And so now I'm going to check the attendee list and see if anybody leaves, just because I said that I don't really know what I'm talking about. I hope you'll stay. For those of you that I don't know, my name is Lance Olson. I'm the Assistant Communication Director for the Department of Workforce Services. I have been with DWS for about, I'm going on 19 years. I started almost 19 years ago as an employment counselor in the West Valley office, which no longer exists, thanks to me. No, just joking. I didn't have anything to do with the closure, but I worked in a number of the offices and done a lot of things over the years. And I've had the opportunity to work in a variety of different capacities, but always very closely with our customer base. And I love the work that we do, and I'm grateful to be a part of it. Currently, my team is responsible for all of the public relations and the media management, and we have a really close involvement with all things homeless. I work closely with Christina Davis, who is the public information officer who works closely with all things homeless. And so get to see things from a very different perspective, but it's been eye-opening and it's been a wonderful experience. So today I was invited to share some thoughts on a concept that I think many of us know to some degree or another. It's called burnout, and I'll take a moment in just a moment and kind of explain what the industry thinks is defined as burnout. But before I do that, I want to just cover a couple of housekeeping things, some things I want you to be aware of. This is a really different kind of format. I mean, I think most of us are pretty familiar with this idea of participating in things virtually, but this is especially weird because I can't see any of you. So it's literally like I'm just talking at a camera, or really just my computer, and hoping and pretending like you're actually out there. I mean, who knows, in 45 minutes, I might realize that I was talking to no one. So how would that be for an experience? So I'm trusting you're there. And in a moment, we're going to find out, because there's going to be a couple of opportunities where I invite you to pause and either to consider and write down a thing or two just for yourself, not for you to share with anyone. A couple of icons might pop up on my slide deck. One of them is the raised hand. And in those few instances, that's my opportunity to invite you to participate. And the way this works in this forum is, if you decide that you want to contribute a thought, you have the option to raise your hand. And then we have Michelle and Joseph. They're going to be helping. They're going to be helping to unmute you and give the opportunity to chime in and share your thoughts. I invite you to do so, please. Let's not make this just me talking at you for the next few minutes. And then also the other little icon that you see there, the hand with the pencil, that's when I might invite you to just copy down a few thoughts, some things that you might find helpful moving forward as you support your organization, trying to support those in Utah who are experiencing homelessness. So those are a couple of housekeeping things. I'm going to start by sharing just very briefly the beginning of a story. Years ago, when I was a supervisor in one of our offices, well, I was a lead supervisor, so I was an assistant supervisor. And at the time, there was an employee that was on the opposite team of mine who, I don't know how to describe this. This person, they were very, very cynical and had what had appeared to become very, very jaded about the work that they were doing. It's not an easy job to be an employment counselor at the workforce services. We get to hear a lot of difficult stories and work with people who are in pretty dire circumstances. And it can be taxing at times. And this particular person had been working as an employment counselor for many, many years. And they were struggling to perform in their job and really, really what appeared to just be unhappy with their job. I'm not going to tell you where that story ended other than that. I'm going to leave it at a cliffhanger and really kind of a depressing note, in the sense that this person was eventually terminated for a variety of reasons, things that I didn't even know about at the time, but and things I wouldn't share here. But that person ended up leaving their employment with the department. But I'm going to tell you, there is a great ending to that story, and we'll get to it eventually. Today, there's a few things that I want to cover, some things, some objectives I hope to achieve. One is I hope that we can just gain a little better understanding about this concept of burnout, identify the problem or the problems associated with what's the underlying problem that we're dealing with, and then gain some personal awareness for each one of us individually and for our organization, identify a solution, and then make a plan about how we are going to move forward to support either our team or our organization. One of the things, I'm going to use a few different metaphors to try and describe this concept. One metaphor that I've always loved, and since I'm kind of going with this theme of fire, oftentimes in our organizations, on our teams, even in our personal lives, when we encounter some sort of a problem, I liken it a lot to like maybe a house that's on fire. And when a home is on fire, even if the fire stays contained to one room, and it might devastate that one room, what's interesting is that oftentimes in a house fire, much of the damage that occurs doesn't actually happen because of the fire. It happens because of the smoke. The room and the building and the home fill with smoke, and that smoke gets into the walls, it gets into the paint, it gets all over the place, and it spreads very rapidly. That smoke ends up destroying a lot of things even when the fire hasn't touched it. Now, so imagine a moment that I'm trying to address the fire in my home. I grab a fire extinguisher, I run around the house, and I'm spraying the smoke with a fire extinguisher. Can you see the lunacy in that? That's ridiculous, right? I'm going to try and put this fire out by spraying the smoke. And yet, that's oftentimes what we do when we encounter some serious, difficult challenge or problem. We address the symptoms and not the underlying issue. And so I hope that we can address a little bit more about what the fire is as it relates to burnout. So let's identify a few things. I'm going to try and paint a distinction between three different concepts and give us a little bit of focus. There's three phrases or concepts that I think sometimes are interchangeably used. And in some ways they do have some crossover. But I wanted to get this out there to make sure that we don't have some confusion related to burnout versus secondary trauma versus compassion fatigue. And all of these, any one of you and any of the people that you work with could experience these in the work that we do. Let's define, first of all, what compassion fatigue is. Oxford defines it as an indifference to charitable appeals on behalf of those who are suffering, experienced as a result of the frequency or number of such appeals. Okay? I think we get that concept, right? Some of us have even probably felt this at times, particularly in the work that we do, which is, in a sense, it's a type of charitable work, a service that we render. Now, let's compare that to secondary trauma. Secondary traumatic stress is the emotional duress that results when an individual hears about the firsthand trauma experiences of another. This could be acute secondary trauma. It could be something that happens just from maybe a one-time acute instance where somebody shares a very traumatic experience, and we might experience secondary trauma, but it could be something that happens over time as well. The repetitive experiencing vicariously through another person their traumatic experiences. That's very real. But what I plan to address a little bit more today, which might have some echoes of those first two, is what's referred to as burnout. Burnout is a syndrome that's conceptualized as resulting from, notice this, a chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. It is characterized by three different dimensions, and we're gonna build on these just a little bit more. First dimension is feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion, increased mental distance from one's job or ineffectiveness, combined with feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job. So if we were to try and kind of visually represent this, I inserted this picture. This is a building that has been burned out. If you look closely, some of you may recognize this image. It's actually from, I think it's from the Salt Lake Tribune, but it's an image of the inside of what was at the time the Provo Tabernacle. So it's a historic building in Provo City Center. And this is the aftermath of a fire that started in the attic and spread throughout the entire building. And I mean, it's pretty devastating to see that inside picture. This building has been rebuilt. It's been built into a temple for the LDS Church, but this was prior to that rebuilding. And one of the first people that identified this concept of burnout was a gentleman by the name of Dr. Herbert Freudenberger, which has to be one of the most doctory sounding doctor names I've ever heard. I love it. Dr. Freudenberger said this. He says, if you've ever seen a building that has been burned out, you know it's a devastating sight. Some bricks or concrete may be left, some outline of windows. Indeed, the outer shell may seem almost intact. Only if you venture inside will you be struck by the full force of the devastation. And I don't know about you. I don't know, maybe you've experienced this yourself personally, or you've been close to someone who's experienced this kind of workplace burnout, where on the outside, they might give the appearance of having everything kind of put together, but inside there's this devastation, this desolation that has occurred from this chronic, three chronic things that happen that really devastate the person mentally, emotionally, from the inside out. So we're going to pause for a moment. And this is where I get you engaged, and we hope that you're actually out there, attendees. So my first question is, what are some of the common approaches, or what are some of the recommended solutions that maybe you've heard of or that come to mind when we think about how to address burnout? So I'm going to pause, give you a chance to raise your hand, and then my counterparts, Joe and Michelle, are going to unmute you and give a chance to speak up. Okay, Lonnie.
I'm just going to, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make sure, I wanted to make sure that you unmuted yourself, but you already did, so thank you.
Thanks, Holly. And Lance, first thing that comes to mind for me is taking a break, like just resting.
Absolutely. Could be short-term or long-term, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Great recommendation. Good. All right. Thanks, Lonnie. All right. Who else? Let's hear another few. Come on, brave souls. You can do it. Travis.
Can you hear me yet? Oh,
I can
there.
hear you now.
Okay. I like to go on a nice vacation.
Love it.
Have a few cocktails, maybe.
It's great. Okay, so this is a total tangent, Travis, but like right now, if you could pick a place, where would it be?
Kauai.
Oh, I'm jealous. Haven't ever been there. Yeah, I love it. No, that's a great one. Take a vacation. And what's interesting is there's a lot of statistics out there that show that in many companies, organizations across the United States, many times people have vacation leave that goes unused, which is really unfortunate, right? Awesome. Thanks, Travis. Appreciate it. Karen, looks like Karen has a comment too.
I would say small indulgences that are scheduled, even if it's walking over to get your $4 coffee.
Yes. Yeah, that's great. I love it. I like how you use the word indulgence. It's funny how we think it's an indulgence, and yet in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't. It's almost necessary, isn't it? Great. Great recommendation. Okay. Any others before we move on?
Oh, one
Okay.
last one.
Got one more. All right, Preston, go for it.
I would say volunteer. Go find something to do, a service project for, and just kind of do something completely different than what you're used to doing.
That's great. Great recommendation. That's awesome. I love it. As a matter of fact, you're going to see some echoes of what you just described found in some of the concepts I share later. So love it. Thank you. All right, great. Okay, so those are all absolutely legitimate and very, very great recommendations. So I'm going to run through these next 4 slides very quickly because this isn't the purpose of my thoughts or my presentation today. But notice, I'm not even going to read. I just might jump around and read a few of these things. Notice that some of the consequences of burnout, you can see that, some excessive stress, some physical or physiological elements like heart disease and high blood pressure. Hey, those are some of the consequences. Hey, some of the risk factors. Notice some of these. These are some of the things you might likely experience. Okay. I'm not going to read any of them. That's a pretty busy slide. I just want to kind of give you a taste of some of these things. Now, these are some questions that we might ask ourselves individually, okay? This is for me personally if I think I might be experiencing burnout. Some things that could help me to almost self-identify or diagnose, right? And then finally, here's some ideas for handling burnout, okay? And some of these are already ones that you mentioned. Takes a relaxing activity, okay? Evaluating our options, getting exercise, more sleep, some mindfulness, okay? Now, here's the thing. That's not the point of my presentation. There are a lot of things that we individually, personally can do, I think, that could really help us to address burnout. This is a little different twist. Today, I'm going to be making the case that we as, and I use the term leaders loosely, but we as individuals who have some responsibility in an organization, it's our responsibility to ensure that our organization is doing its part to support our team and our employees so that they do not experience this, that they can identify it beforehand. We don't want to find ourselves like the proverbial ostrich with head in the sand and just not aware of what our workplace might be doing to contribute to burnout. I heard the story once. It's kind of like this. So I don't remember where I heard the story, but it's like there's these people that are walking through the forest or the jungle, and they come to this beautiful stream, and they're at the top or the top of a beautiful waterfall, and they notice floating down the stream is this baby. And this baby's about to go over the waterfall. And I mean, that's scary. It's traumatic. So somebody jumps in, they save the baby. And just as they exit and they get out onto the dry land, they see another baby floating down the river. And someone else runs in there and grabs that baby. And then another baby comes floating down the river. And so everybody jumps in, they get involved to try and save these babies before they go over the waterfall. And yet 2 people in the group, they just disappear. They jet and they run up the pathway. And somebody's like, what are they doing? They yell up to them, what are you doing? And the 2 people running away say, we're going to find out who these scuzzbags are that are dropping babies into the river. And the point is that sometimes we wait for employees or even for ourselves until we're already in the midst of something like burnout and try and address that problem. And I'm going to share some thoughts about things that we can do upstream to try and prevent the burnout. It's kind of like the dentist who encourages the brushing of the teeth, right? An ounce of prevention. So use a couple of metaphors to kind of illustrate this idea of burnout. Think of a rocket booster. Why does a rocket booster burn out? Well, it burns out because it loses its primary source of fuel, right? This fuel burns out, and as a result, it can't go any further. Here's a better one, though. I like this idea. A ball bearing, I think most everyone understands what a ball bearing is. We may not appreciate all the ways that it's used, but ball bearings can also burn out. Okay? It's an interesting thing to think about. These are some of the reasons that a ball bearing might go bad and burn out. Okay? A ball bearing inside of maybe a wheel is sealed. It's vacuum sealed so that it's protected. And that protection keeps the lubricant or the oil inside there. It keeps it so that it's flowing smoothly. But if that seal gets broken, then the environment changes, debris gets into the bearing, it's not maintained, and eventually the friction from dirt or whatever that gets inside of the ball bearing will wear away the components. And in the most extreme situations, I don't know if that's what actually happened here in this picture, but in the most extreme situations, a ball bearing, like on a car axle, it could cause a car to crash or to roll. And think about that metaphorically for us as individuals. If we don't identify when that seal is broken, when there's contaminant in our lives, then we might find ourselves losing control and eventually meeting a pretty dire end. Now, that sounds really traumatic. I don't want to sound that traumatic, but you get the idea, right? So what's the solution? I'm kind of using this question, no contribution needed. I just rhetorically asking this question, what's the solution to the burned out ball bearings? Well, our immediate reaction might be, duh, get new ball bearings. But notice I said JK, I'm joking, because if we approach that as leaders in an organization and we just thought, well, we'll just get more people. They burn out, that's just life, that's just part of the hard job that we do. Let's just get new ball bearings. And that's just not a real effective way to approach our jobs. Think of it this way. Now, there's an image here of, this is a canary. And many of you have probably heard of the story or the practice of using the canary in the coal mine. Anybody out there want to jump in, raise your hand, and relate to us what you know about the canary and the coal mine? I'll pause here for a minute. If somebody wants to just relate to us what you know about that. Monty.
Hello.
Hey.
So in the mines, sometimes there is gas. Sometimes there is something happening with the gas. You can't smell it, or some poisonous gas. Let's just say that. Regular human being can't smell it, can't detect it until it's too late, and they've died. Right. So they used to carry the canaries in. The canary fell off at perch. It's time to get out of the mine.
That's right. Perfect. Well said. Thank you very much. So yeah, thanks again, Monty. So think about what Monty just described and how that relates to the way that we might traditionally approach burnout. And there's nothing inherently wrong with us as an organization trying to find let's try and find maybe some new resources out there, maybe some therapy or some mental health services. Those things are all really important, okay? And they can indeed be helpful. But if we're not recognizing that the problem is not the canary, the problem is not the workers in the mine. The problem is that the condition is not conducive to operating and working effectively and in a healthy way. Okay, so we need to address the environment that might be leading to burnout. The environment that surrounds us is contributing in some way, shape, or form to this potential for burnout. And so as I mentioned, I read this before in the definition of burnout. there's really three reasons or three elements that contribute to this chronic situational stress. So we mentioned first exhaustion. That's individual stress. This is the person that can't take it anymore, the person who has difficulty even getting out of bed, or maybe they're sleepless at night because they're so tired. There's cynicism. This is that negative response to the job, that feeling like my workplace is toxic, I'm jaded, everybody that I'm serving or I'm helping, I just can't stand being around them, I can't stand working with them. And then there's this concept of professional inefficiency. This is this negative self-evaluation. I just can't cut it. I feel like I can't measure up. I feel like I cannot do my job. And when you take these three elements and you combine them, they are what indeed contribute to burnout. Okay? Now, this is an opportunity for you to maybe write a note. I'm just going to give you 30 seconds or maybe a minute, but you don't have to do it yet. I just want you to begin to think about, I'm going to go through a few things here in my next few slides, and I want you to begin to think about, oh no, I'm jumping forward. Actually, I want you to do this right now. Take note of a time when you or someone that you know demonstrated some of these signs. So remember, these are the signs once again: exhaustion, cynicism, and ineffectiveness. And then ask yourself these few questions. What did it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about that. Okay, didn't give you long. I just want you thinking in that direction. So this here is an image of a woman by the name of Dr. Christina Maslach, and I think she's emeritus professor, but she worked for a number of years at the University of California, Berkeley. And she, since the 70s, has been studying this concept of burnout, workplace burnout, produced a lot of really great information. If you want to find out more, I'm going to be sharing some concepts from her work. She's a great resource to go to about understanding job burnout. And so for years, she had been presenting on these different concepts I'm about to share with you in a moment. And what she shared an interesting story. She had been invited to come to Sweden, and when in Sweden, she presented on this information. And what she found out is that Sweden has this interesting practice to try and deal with job burnout. They have the government supports a practice where if a person is struggling with their mental health on the job, they allow up to, it's like something like 12 or 18 months of some sort of sabbatical where you can actually leave your job. You're paid for your time off. Your mental health is paid for. Your job is protected. And when you come back, you can jump right back into that same job with the same pay. Sounds like a sweet gig. What she found really interesting, though, is after she went to Sweden, she had been kind of like, some news reports had been run about the work that she was doing and that she was spending some time there. She'd spent several months there doing some research. Well, she would get stopped on the street occasionally by some of the people that had read the stories about her, and they're like, "Oh, hey, you're the burnout lady," and she's like, "Yeah." And so she'd get into talking to them. And one interesting thing she found out that was really common is that many of the people that would stop her on the street were the ones who had left their job recently to take advantage of this 12 or 16 or 18-month break. But most of them would tell her the same thing. They would say, "I do not want to go back to that job." So even with this break and this opportunity to go back, they did not want to go back to the job that they felt had been the source of this burnout for them. So here's a question. I don't want you to answer this just yet. I want you to think about, what do you think are some of the workplace circumstances that contribute most to individuals experiencing some type of burnout? I have a hand up here. I'm watching my time, and I'm gonna let you think to it of yourself. What are some of the, well, no, let's do this. How about one or two people? Tell me, what are some of the things that you feel contribute most to individuals who experience burnout? Once again, I'll pause. Raise your hand if you have a comment. What's been your experience? Anyone? Oh, Rob, thank you.
Hey, some of the things that I was just thinking of is just that, it seems like we ask employees always to be doing more with less. We're constantly giving them more and more work, but not, it leaves the company for retirement or for just other purposes or whatever, then we end up either not hiring for that position and just put the rest, that person's workload on everybody else. And so I think that that's just one thing that contributes to it, is just that people feel overworked and not, we're not increasing their pay or giving them any more benefits other than just, saying, here, do this work and we appreciate what you do.
Yep. Well said. Couldn't have said it better. Spot on. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, great. That's actually on the list here. We're going to cover that. Yep. Workload is a big one. And oftentimes we say, hey, work smarter, not harder, but sometimes it just feels like harder, right? All right, Travis, next.
I would say feeling unappreciated.
Ooh, good one. Good one. Just not appreciated for the effort that I do make, right? Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you. I love it. I'm even writing some of these down. Okay, who's next? Preston.
I would say personal financial struggles. I think individuals that I've worked with a lot, if they're experiencing those type of situations, a lot of time that carries over into the workplace.
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Man, and in another time we could have a really great conversation about that, because that's a really big deal. That's a great one. Excellent. Thank you. All right. Who's up next? Is it Lana or Lana?
It's Lana. Hello.
Great.
Hi. I would say not feeling close to or connected with my coworkers or clients I'm working with, the people around me. When I feel like that contributes to burnout.
Absolutely. Great one. Awesome. Thank you very much, Lana. And then let's take one more. Nancy, what are your thoughts?
Am I unmuted right now?
Nope, you're up.
Oh, perfect. I mean, a lot of them were my number 1 and 2 answers, but I think miscommunication between teams has, in my experience, has caused us burnout when we're working as a team with different case managers and therapists, and it seems like everybody's on a different page. That has tended to cause some burnout too.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the implications of that, right? When there's that constant miscommunication, we're not on the same page, you feel like you're spinning your wheels, right? It's like we're not even accomplishing what we need to because we're not on the same page. Yeah, great one. Awesome. Thanks, Nancy. All right, great. You know what's so wonderful is that was like a perfect tee up for these 6 things. So what I've got here in front of you is the result of the decades of research that Dr. Maslach has done. And what they identified is that in addition to all of the other things that we've talked about so far, and some of these are just repeats of some of the things that you all shared, these are the 6 key areas that they find when there's a mismatch or an imbalance between person and job that it leads to burnout. It doesn't mean that there aren't others, but these are the 6 key ones that they found are most common. And interestingly, they're not listed in the order of priority. They're actually listed in order of what we think our perception is of what they ought to be in. And as let's see, maybe it was Rob, as Rob identified, workload oftentimes comes to the top of our list, but there's also control, reward, community, fairness, and value. And I'm actually going to dig into these a little bit more. So what I want to invite you to do as I go through these for the next few minutes and just ask a few questions related to each one of those 6 areas, I want each of you to be thinking about, in my organization, my team, for my area of influence, what is it that I think that we can improve or change in the near future? Of these 6 things, is there something that I think that I can be doing to try and move us in the right direction of helping to alleviate some of this burnout? So, first one, workload. This could be defined as too many demands and not enough resources, right? So here's a few questions to ask. Is the workload reasonable? Is it equitably distributed? Do our people have the resources to do their job? And do we encourage and invite breaks or variations in the work that we do? Those are just the beginning, just scratching the surface. I'm sure if we had more time, we could have a really great discussion about other questions that we need to ask ourselves related to workload. And this is a particularly tricky one because so much of the workload that we have in the work that we do, we don't really have a lot of control of the influx. We just have the people that come to us and we need to serve them. So sometimes we have to get really creative in responding to those demands. Okay, so that's the first one, workload. Now, control. This is really maybe the way to define it is the amount of autonomy that a person has in their work. So here's some questions to ask yourself. Do we dictate all aspects of a person's job? Do we tell them everything that they have to do in order to accomplish their job? What areas can we allow for freedom to accomplish the goals maybe that have been identified or the objectives? And another great question is, do we invite feedback and ideas from our employees on how to get the work done? So many of us have our objectives. I know that for my department, a lot of our objectives are dictated by federal mandate. The federal government, because they are the ones that fund us, they determine what the goals are and the objectives that we have to meet. But then we have to ask ourselves, within those constraints of what the federal government has dictated, what kind of latitude, what kind of flexibility, what kind of wiggle room do we have to allow people to accomplish their objectives using their own creativity and ingenuity? Those are some of the questions that we need to begin asking ourselves. Third one is reward. Now, this is often thought of in a couple of different ways, intangible and intangible rewards. Tangible might be those things like salary, benefits, and perks. Those things are all very important. If we had more time, I think it might have been Travis, I can't remember who talked about pay, or Preston talked about personal finances. There's a whole different area of research that demonstrates that we need to be paying our people at least what we refer to as a hygiene level or a livable wage. And that's tricky sometimes, particularly in social services, because there's not this surplus of money and we don't have profit, so to speak. But in addition to those tangible rewards that are out there, the research, what's demonstrated is so many of the intangible rewards can be equally, if not more important. So what are many of the intangible things that we can do as an organization, as a leader, as a team, to help people feel that their accomplishments are recognized and that the work that they do matters? So what other type of rewards are important? Noticing people for the great work that they do, helping them to understand that the work that they do is meaningful and that it contributes not only to our clients or customers, but it contributes to the success of other people on the team. That is particularly important. And so this not feeling appreciated is a significant contributor to this idea of burnout. The next concept is community. And this was actually brought up. Lana brought up this idea of this closeness that we feel to others. So community is really all about relationships. What are the relationships that I have with the others that I work with? Are these relationships functioning well? Are they supportive? Is there trust? Do you know something about the people that you work with? And what I mean by that question is, do I know a little bit beyond just the job that they do? Do I know them a little bit personally? There's value in knowing some personal aspects. I mean, of course, put on pause, not too personal, of course, but some personal aspects of the people. What are their interests? What is it that makes them tick? And are we interested in each other's lives? These kinds of things, building these types of relationships, can help us even when the workload is high, even when the demands are high, even when the work is very difficult. Sometimes these healthy relationships can make up for the burnout that might occur because of the difficulty of the work. So what can we do to help enhance the relationships that exist within our organization. Next one is fairness. Now, this is more of are the policies and practices that are even the written and spoken policies and practices, or even the unwritten practices, are they fairly administered? Here's a few questions we might ask ourselves. Are there glass ceilings? Is there discrimination? Is there favoritism? Do people feel like they have an equal chance of growing, progressing, and moving forward, particularly among leadership? If you have some sort of an actual authority role, whether you're in program or whether you're a manager, a supervisor, am I careful to ensure that I'm being equitable and fair in the way that I treat the people that either work for me, that I work with? Okay? You can see how that would very, very quickly lead to a person feeling disenchanted and disfranchised with their job and disconnecting from the work that they do, which could lead to burnout. And then finally, the last one that she identifies is this idea of meaning. Why am I doing what I'm doing? This is this idea of purpose. And what's really great is that so many of us work for organizations where we do feel like we have a higher purpose. But I have to step back and ask myself, do I understand what I care about most? And do I understand that what I value personally aligns with the work that we do? Why am I even here? What do I care about? What's important to me? And what contribution do I feel like that I can make to society as a whole, or to my organization, or to the people that I serve? When people lose their why, they oftentimes lose their way. And so helping our employees reconnect, and it was mentioned earlier, this idea of sometimes even going somewhere else to volunteer and to serve and help other people that's different than what I do from day to day, can help me reconnect with my why, my meaning, and my purpose. So that's a recap. Once again, the reason I share that with you and I'm cruising through this is I want you to begin to think about these 6 areas and ask yourself, what can I individually or we as an organization do to improve or change in the near future to try and alleviate some of these factors that might contribute to this idea of burnout? Now, there are 7 in Dr. Maslach's work. I'm going to cover just a couple of really important things in the last few minutes that we have. She talks about 7 core needs, and this will feel a little bit redundant, but it's a slight twist to those 6 areas that I just identified. The more that we can help fill these core needs, the more positive people are going to feel about the work that they do. And these are the 6 core needs. As I mentioned before, autonomy. In whatever way we possibly can we allow individuals to have some sense of control or choice in the work that they do? Belongingness, as was mentioned before, this idea of closeness to coworkers, belonging, feeling like I'm a part of something larger, that there's something important that we do. Sometimes we need to help others. Maybe there's someone that we need to have a conversation with that, are you feeling like you belong outside of the organization? Are you connected to a team or some other outside interest that you might have? Competence, meaning that does the person feel competent and capable? They feel reassured that they're capable of doing their job. Is there more that we can do to develop their core competencies so that they can be successful? Positive emotions, we can contribute more to this idea of helping people feel good. Periodically, we can celebrate. We need to find ways that we can laugh more and relax and let go to create a more positive environment. This idea of psychological safety, man, we could spend an entire few hours on this idea alone, but do we create an environment where people feel like that the ideas and the contributions that they have, that they matter? Or do we sometimes inadvertently contribute to a feeling that people might not feel like that they can contribute their ideas? Do we shoot them down, or do we disregard or ignore or cause them to feel irrelevant in their contributions? Fairness, as I mentioned before, and then finally, values. Identifying what people value and aligning it with the work that we do in our organization. So, what are some of the goals that we can identify? Here's some 6 paths. This is, once again, as I mentioned, it's redundant. I'm just trying to get us all to think in this direction. Sustainable workload. It's not about working hard or not, working long hours, but it's something that can be sustained. Is there time to recover? get rest before we go back in? What more can we do to help people to manage that workload or get the resources that they need? Can we help people find a path to choice and control? Can we create greater opportunities for recognition and reward above and beyond those tangible things that are monetary in nature? Can we do more to create a supportive working community? This doesn't mean that we all have to agree, but we have to find a way to work through our conflicts and disagreements. Can we figure out how to move forward even if we don't agree on things? And that can we trust each other and rely on the advice and the mentoring of other people? Can we do more to create more fairness and respect, and then clearly identify what we value and finding that meaning and purpose? So, as I said, that was a little bit redundant. I went through it several times, but I'm just trying to re-emphasize the importance of these 6 paths. So here's the question. I want you to identify, and I'm going to give you just a moment because I don't want you to walk away from the few minutes that you've had here. I'd hate for all of us to walk away and be like, oh, that was great. That's interesting, but not really do anything. So I'm going to go on pause for a moment. I'm going to go quiet for about 45 seconds to a minute. And I want you to write down and identify from these key areas, what's one thing that I feel like I can do for the next step in my organization? I'll go back to them so you can see. And then I promise to go quiet for a second. Okay, that was about a minute. If you're still writing, that's fine. If you're not writing at all, that's fine too. So before I wrap things up, I wanted to just kind of open it up. Is there anything that anybody wants to contribute to this conversation? We've got a few more minutes. I'm going to tell you the end of the story that I started at the beginning. Anything that anybody wants to contribute, any ideas that they've had, other things that you found that work for you as it relates to managing burnout in our organizations? This is that awkward silence. It'd be a little easier if we were in person, right? We'd all look at each other. Awesome. Okay, let's start with Travis then. Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I think something that works for me with my staff is regular staff meetings where you can come together and you can discuss any issues that have arisen, work out some solutions, and also hear from all your staff and just kind of get a pulse on where everybody's at.
That's awesome. Great suggestion. I love it. Thanks, Travis. Yeah, I love this idea of kind of getting together and hey, you know, identify your biggest headache. What can we do to help you? What can we do to support you? That's great. Okay, who's next? Rob.
I think the one thing that I like to do is just recognize, you know, and celebrate when somebody does something good on my team, and just making sure that they're recognized for it, or even just me alone, just telling them good job, you know, and talking to them about it and stuff. I think that positive reinforcement goes a long ways, you know, and if we just recognize people for what they're actually doing, then they feel a sense of accomplishment.
Hear, hear. Awesome. Love it. That's great. And the studies show that the sooner we can recognize someone to the moment of when they completed or accomplished something, the greater the impact it even has too. Great thought. All right. Who else? Anyone else? Are we good? Okay. Awesome. Thanks everyone for your contributions. Okay, so I'm gonna just to make you know, or just to share with you all, to keep myself accountable. When I asked you to write something down, I identified something for my team. So in this world of working from home, much of my team actually is able to work from home, and this ability to connect has been really tricky at first. And so we have started, but haven't done a great job of connecting, finding creative ways to connect. And so one thing that we've recently started doing is, it's been a couple of months now that we've really enjoyed, but we connect virtually on something that it's kind of a spin-off of, what's his name? John Krasinski's from The Office. He did a Some Good News thing during the pandemic, early days of the pandemic. So my team gets together and we spend some time talking about things that have nothing to do with work at all. And it's been really great. It's really great because it helps us to develop some of that cohesiveness. We get to see each other as real people who have interests and desires and challenges outside of the work that we do. So I'm going to try and do more to create that connection. All right, to wrap it up. So I struggled trying to share this story because at first I thought this is kind of I don't know if this is the best example, because the end result was that this person was terminated. And I'm not suggesting that's the solution to somebody who feels burned out, right? Here's the point of the story though. I think it was a little over a year later when I encountered this person on the street in a store, this person that had been terminated. I was blown away. This person had, just to kind of paint the picture, they were so much happier. I mean, the contrast on their face was noticeable. They were so much happier. They were so much more contented with what was going on in their life. They shared with me the work that they were doing, and it was something that they were really invested in and that they had this deep desire to be doing. They had, I mean, just to give you an idea, this person had lost, I think it was something over 80 pounds. So physically, they were healthier. They were so much happier. Now, I'm not suggesting, like I said, the solution to burnout is to quit. I guess it could be. But the point was that this person had lost the meaning and their purpose, and they had become very cynical and exhausted in the work that they were doing. And for this particular person, they found a new purpose. I think each of us can do that within our organizations now. We can help identify in these 6 areas, what can we do to make adaptations? As a matter of fact, I kind of look at us as the heart of the solution is that we have a responsibility to create a great workplace experience. I'm going to build off of this theme of firefighters. Each of us, rather than just being the person who fights the fire, we can be the fire preventer. And by understanding these 6 areas and identifying what the next best thing is that I can do to try and improve my work environment, we can make a significant contribution in making it a better experience and managing and improving the work-life experience of the people that we serve, which will in turn help us to meet our objectives as an organization, better serve our clients and our customers, and that we personally as well, in our responsibilities and roles, will find more meaning and more satisfaction. So thanks for your time, everybody. I hope you learned something. I hope that you'll move forward and you'll actually do what it is that you committed to do, and that you'll find success in your efforts. Thanks and have a great afternoon.
Thank you, Lance.